Well, grace and peace to you from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ, and welcome to this leader orientation presentation. I'm Claire Claiborne. Please believe me when I tell you it is my joy and honor to be your pastor here at First United Methodist Church. We're ending a year of unprecedented challenges with the pandemic, and I'm grateful to say that we are ending the year in a healthy position financially, with leadership, and with an expanded reach and impact of our mission and ministry. Now, much has changed, of course, in terms of how we live into our mission and ministry, but what has not changed has been the commitment of our leaders and congregation to reach our community with good news. In a lot of cases, that has looked like food and lots of it, but also online worship, expanded small groups, new technology or additional technology, including what I'm doing right now. I've never done this before, and an embracing of worship from home while we are connected together through technology and doing all we can to love one another well and keep one another safe. Our leadership team has faced extraordinary challenges and has weathered them at every turn with wisdom, patience, and a willingness to say yes to what God might be doing in every opportunity. I'm so grateful. And you're joining those ranks this year. Now, some of you who are watching this are continuing in a leadership role that you already hold or have held. Some of you are perhaps new to a particular leadership role here, but not new to church leadership. And others of you perhaps are becoming church leaders for the first time. And we say thank you and welcome. So this orientation is, of course, for all of you, but it's especially for those who are new to leadership here. I hope that it'll be helpful to you. Now, our first meeting of the Administrative Council will be in the new year, January 21st, and we have a lot to do, and so we want to begin our work right away. So it really will be helpful if you will watch this before then. And if after watching you have questions, please do reach out to me or to Jim Barnes, our new council chair. We'll be happy to answer them for you. So I want to begin with a little bit about First United Methodist Church. Not going into history today, but about some other things. Say it with me. Our mission is to make disciples of Jesus Christ through love and service. Our mission statement guides all our work. At every decision point, we ask, will this help us create disciples of Jesus Christ? Is our work guided by a spirit of love and service? Are we providing people with opportunities to grow in their love and service? Our vision is a loving and diverse community, meeting the real needs of our neighbors through spirit-filled worship, intergenerational discipleship, and caring service. A vision statement is what I like to call a destination postcard. It's a picture of what we will see when we are fully living into our mission. It's a picture of the future that we believe through prayer and discernment God is actually pulling us toward. It's our God-sized dream. Every word in this vision statement is packed with meaning. I invite you to think about what picture it paints for you as you think about who we are when we are fully living into our vision. Maybe you might even find or create or draw or in some way make a picture of what that some embodiment of this vision. And I invite you to do that and to bring it with you to our first meeting as a way for us to orient ourselves to the work that we share in this coming year. Now, our core values tell us how we will get to our vision. We won't get there except as we pay attention to these guardrails. Now, your particular team, or ministry, or work area gives life and witness to these core values. I would call them DNA. And while there might be a core value that particularly applies to your team's work, all of our teams live into and incorporate these core values into how we approach our life together. So, if while your team is doing your work, you find yourself stuck and not sure how to move forward on a decision point, you can come back to our mission, our vision, and our core values and ask yourself, does what we are proposing help us make disciples through love and service? Should it be included, or is it included on our destination postcard of our church, Fully Alive? Does it live well into the core values of how it is that we do our work? Now, the mission and vision and core values of our church were created through a labor of love a few years ago by members of this team working together with Plow Point Ministries. It is good and faithful and fruitful work. I commend it, and we continue to work from it, and we affirm it. Now, this next section, I want to just talk a little bit about the United Methodist Church. And these are the things I think you would expect to find in any United Methodist church in just about any place. And I want to begin with what I think is the core Methodist DNA. I call it grace upon grace, connection upon connection. Now, grace upon grace is a verse from John's Gospel, chapter 1:16. And it's John Wesley's signature contribution to the Protestant movement, which of course began a couple hundred years before his life, but in the 1700s when he lived, it was his signature contribution to this movement. And it is his description of the ways that God's grace is active throughout our lives, shaping us more and more into the image and likeness of Christ. He described it in three ways: prevenient grace, which is God at work in our lives before we're ever even aware of it, bringing us into a state of readiness for life with Christ. If you imagine grace as a kind of a house, then prevenient grace is the front porch. Justifying grace is our saying yes to God. This is the front door, the threshold of the house. And sanctifying grace is the grace that carries us through the rest of our lives. It's the work of the Holy Spirit, even after we have said yes to Christ, continuing to shape us and bring us closer and closer to Christ. Sanctifying grace is living in the house of God. Now, the other distinctive thing about being Methodist and the United Methodist Church is that we are a connectional church. And what we mean by that is that we are intentionally organized to be able to join together for mission and ministry around the world. We understand that by joining our efforts, we are able to accomplish more and change lives for the better in more and more lasting ways. If you've ever given to disaster response, for example, you've participated in a connectional ministry where your efforts have been gathered with those of others to have a more meaningful and lasting impact. If you've ever been with the youth to Robeson County or even to pilgrimage, you've experienced the work of the connection. Now, I've put this slide together as a sort of a nested table, kind of like a set of nested dolls. The charge conference right there in the center, the green dot, is the local church, and that's where we begin. The members of the administrative council are the elected members of charge conference. This is where the majority of decisions that affect us at the local level are made. Now, in rural churches or sometimes churches of small membership, sometimes two or more churches will come together to make up a charge. Charges are arranged geographically into districts. We are part of the corridor district, and districts make up the annual conference, which is presided over by a bishop. And in the United States, most annual conference boundaries are state lines, but our state is large and Methodists are numerous in North Carolina. So there actually are two annual conferences in our state. We're part of the North Carolina Conference, and that covers Alamance County east all the way to the Outer Banks. There are about 800 churches or charges of all sizes in our conference. And the United States, the country is divided into regional bodies, and overseas uh, Methodists also have regional bodies, and those are called jurisdictions. And their primary purpose is to elect bishops. We're part of the Southeast jurisdiction, and that group meets every 4 years to elect bishops and handle any other business that might come up. And the large big circle, the yellow circle, it represents General Conference. And that is the representation made up from lay and clergy delegates from every annual conference across the connection from all parts of the world. And delegates are awarded to annual conferences based on the United Methodist population relative to the whole. Now, if that sounds a little bit like how Congress is made up, you're an alert listener. The United Methodist Church, back then it was the Methodist Episcopal Church, was birthed about the same time as our nation. And so elected representational leadership was a grand idea that shows up in our denomination as well as in our nation. When we say we have an Episcopal structure, what we mean is that we have bishops. We don't have a pope, and we are not an independent congregation. We are connected on purpose. And that connection is expressed by having bishops who are consecrated for spiritual and practical oversight of the churches. Bishops are ordained elders who are elected by the clergy and lay members of the jurisdictional conferences. Bishops appoint pastors to their places of service. And our current bishop, Hope Morgan Ward, always makes the point that when we are appointed to a charge, we are appointed not just to the local church, but to the community in which the charge resides as well. The General Conference meets every 4 years. It is the only group that can speak for the whole denomination. Normally, this meeting would have happened in May of 2020, but it was postponed because of the pandemic and is scheduled to happen in late August of 2021. The annual conference is made up of equal numbers of clergy and lay members from every charge in the conference. And as you might expect, it meets annually to approve mission and ministry priorities, both in terms of how the conference allocates its personnel and its financial resources. We are part of the North Carolina Annual Conference. And for the last quadrennium, and it's been extended, the 5 emphases or priorities of the conference have been to have healthy congregations in every place, effective leaders in every place, to be working on dismantling racism, congregations for children, and the unity of the church. The Charge Conference is the basic organizational structure of the church. It meets annually, usually presided over by our district superintendent, who is Mike Freese, to set the pastor's compensation, to give an accounting of God's faithfulness to us, and to give an accounting of the ways we've been effective in our mission and ministry priorities as well. Now, from time to time, persons experience a call to ministry in the United Methodist Church. And when they do, their first step is to meet with their pastor. And then in due time to meet with the staff parish relations committee who listens with them to the story of their call and how God is at work in their lives. And when the staff parish committee affirms that call, then the next step is to go to the charge conference. And it is the charge conference who discerns whether or not to move this person into the process for ordination. So every step of the journey for entering ministry begins in the local church. Now, the charge conference is the elected membership of the administrative council. There are a few people on our council, such as retired clergy who may relate to our church, who are also part of the charge conference, but it's fairly tantamount to the people who make up our administrative council. Charge conference is open to anyone to attend, but only those who have membership on the administrative council vote on charge conference matters. Now, the administrative council requires two wings to fly, if you will forgive me such a terrible metaphor. The ministry's work areas carry out the mission and ministry of the church. And on this slide, you'll see a partial listing of some of those teams. It's likely that you're on one of those teams. But the other wing that helps this fly is the executive teams. And those are lay leadership, board of directors, staff parish, finance teams. And all of these teams give administrative life to the church and making sure that the church is faithfully handling the resources of personnel and building and finances and leadership. And the staff is responsible to equip and empower the teams for their ministry. So when the administrative council is working together, there are ministry teams that carry out those priorities. There are executive teams that provide support for administering the resources available for that ministry. And there are staff who help equip and empower laity. This year, we welcome a new chair to our administrative council, Jim Barnes. Jim is a seasoned church and university leader, and he brings both wisdom and experience to this role. Jim will lead and plan the meetings throughout the year, and in the new year, you will be hearing from him about different matters that might require your attention, so that when we do have our first meeting on January 21st, you are ready to participate in that. He will invite you to contribute reports, budget needs, any sort of affirmation or decision points that you and your team might have that need the approval of the whole council throughout the year. Now, when we invited you to become a leader at First United Methodist Church, we took into consideration not just the particular skills you have for the work we asked you to do, but we also asked you to become a leader because you bring with you a Christ-like spirit, and you are a growing and a committed disciple of Christ. And those two things must go together for us, both the skill set and the character set of one who is becoming more and more like Christ. As I've said before, this past year has been unlike any in our lifetime, but we've adapted and quickly to many challenges with remarkable agility. I personally, and I think you will agree with me, rejoice in the development of a vaccine or several vaccines for this coronavirus, and with it, the hope that we can begin to return to a more normal way of life that includes being able to return safely to large group indoor gatherings such as worship. But I also believe, and I expect you do too, that it will take some time for the full return of all that we were used to. And I think that hybrid models of church will become the new norm. And as your pastor, I want you as a leader to hear from me that I do not fear the future. I know God is already there, and God is preparing for us and preparing us for the future. And one of the things that I'm sure has allowed us to expand our ministries and our impact, even in the midst of a pandemic, has been the way in which this leadership team has approached the necessary decision points that we've had to make. We've been using appreciative inquiry, a spirit of presence and discernment throughout the year to make important decisions. We want to deeply embed and internalize those habits and that leadership process and people as faithful ways to lead in uncertain times. Now, in normal times, when teams have a clear understanding of their programs and the events that they do from time to time that they carry out, Then our group meetings can often be used to catch up with one another on reports, decisions that must be made from time to time that are brought forward. We even have time to enjoy the social and spiritual nourishment that comes from doing God's work together. We're not yet in normal times. And so this next year, we will spend time together learning about and developing these group leadership habits of presence, appreciative inquiry, and discernment. Now, most of us already live into this in beautiful and good ways. So, really, this focus is more about strengthening and naming these already developed habits. But on the screen, you will see the four movements and habits of the work that help live into the 4D model. Now, on the screen, there are the four C's, even though it's a 4D model. And just allow me a little bit of Christmas humor. That's just sort of how it came out for me as I was putting this together. But we will come together every time for a time of what I'm calling consent. Uh, those are the matters that don't really require a lot of discussion. They're generally presented for information, such as team reports, minutes, things that we could all benefit from reading ahead of time and being prepared just to come ready with that information. Conversation can be the things that each team might bring that need discussion or discernment, but also the things that we might be learning together from common reading that we're doing. Commitment is about the items that need action and decision making. And then finally, credibility, which is about how we will hold ourselves accountable to our mission, vision, and core values. In other words, how will we know when we've done what we're supposed to do? Now, you'll be hearing from Jim throughout the year about the different ways that you, as team leaders, can live into that. But when you do, you will hear the reports that you can send in for consent agenda, the ways that you might be carefully attentive to the things to bring forward that do need the whole group's attention and decision, and being present to the work we might do from time to time to come ready for discussion and discernment about embedding these leadership habits. I'm asking all of us to read together a book next year called How to Lead When You Don't Know Where You're Going. It's by Susan Beaumont. There are a couple of copies already in our church library. I have 4 copies that I am happy to share, first come, first serve. Or if you prefer to do this kind of reading on an e-reader, you can go to Amazon or whatever site you use and download the book as a Kindle or whatever other device you might have. And what I want to ask each of you to do is to read chapters 1 and 2 before January 21st, so that when we come together, we'll begin that team discernment through the slow read of this book. Now, I know that you're wondering about when we will do calendaring, and the short answer is I don't know. You can do all the calendaring you want to do, but I cannot yet tell you when we will be back to our regular programmatic life, particularly as it might involve gathering in large groups indoors. But there is work you can be doing even in the first quarter, even in the month of January. And that is to make sure that your team has a good understanding of its mission and how its own team mission fits into the overall mission of the church. So here are some questions that you can use for your team as you gather in the first quarter, January through March of next year. Questions that help you define and refine your goals. Certainly set your calendar as you can and make connections with other teams whose help you might need to carry out your work. The second quarter, April through June, could be focused on interpretation and witness, particularly about how your work is helping our church connect more with our neighbors. What are the stories that are coming forth from that work? The third quarter is about refining and reaching. It's about thinking ahead to Charge Conference and what stories we will want to tell. What are the good news stories that are coming about because of your team's work? The fourth quarter is about accountability and alignment. It's about thinking about the resources that you will need to continue your work. Um, any needs that you might have that either the finance or building board of directors might need to know. What are the stories you want to celebrate at Charge Conference? Now, most people have questions about how the money works at First United Methodist Church. What's the difference between current expense and special funds, for example? I would say that our church lives in two streams. We have an operating budget that is raised and spent in the same year, and that covers most of our needs for staffing, programmings, missional spending, routine maintenance. We also have special funds, we call them restricted funds, that accumulate over time and that are designated for particular ministries. An example of that is the annual scholarships that we give to graduates. Those funds can be invested. They cannot be repurposed away from their designated use, except in the case of an emergency that would threaten the existence of the church. We've never really had one of those. If you need some help in understanding the resources available to your team, you can contact Lou Vincent, our financial secretary, Pam Hurt, our treasurer, or John Spurrier, our finance team chair, and any of those folks will be able to help you read the budget sheets as it pertains to your team's area and help you know what resources are available to you. Now, the budget process is certainly year long, and in some ways it's constantly ongoing, but it begins in earnest in early fall. In July, after annual conference and the annual conference budget has been decided, we receive our fair share apportionments for the following year. And then in August and September and early fall, these executive teams begin their work in earnest about aligning resources and ministry, particularly thinking about resources that we might need for staffing, anything beyond routine maintenance on our facilities, things like that. And the finance team begins its work through the stewardship team on communicating with you about how we will need funds and what your response might be. Then later in the fall, in September and October, ministry teams would send their budget requests to the finance chair, which again suggests that you've done some work in knowing what your priorities will be so that you know what resources you will need for that. And during September and October, the stewardship committee is working to raise those resources and receive commitments for the coming year. And the finance committee does its work to make sure those things work together, both in anticipated resources and anticipated ministry. In October and November, the Charge Conference meets to approve the pastor's compensation for the coming year. And then throughout the year, as the rest of the resources and budgets are made ready for staff compensation beyond the pastor's compensation and other needs, those things come before administrative council to be approved toward the end of the year for the next year. This pie chart shows a breakdown of our 2021 church budget. The thing I would point out to you is that the light blue triangle is what we call our apportionments, our fair share. Those are the dollars that are used to help us be in ministry for the denomination and around the world. And you'll see that that's just under 11% of our budget. And that means right at 89, 90% of our budget funds raised stays right here and accomplishes a mission and ministry right here. Now, I know I've just given you a lot of information. I've scratched the surface. It's the tip of that iceberg. There are many other places you can go to get more information about the United Methodist Church, particularly. Those are on the screen. I particularly call to your attention that there will be a conference-wide leadership training event in early January. It will be a virtual training on a Sunday afternoon, and the link there will let you tell you where to register and how to register if you are interested in doing that. We also have uh, guides in our church library on file of just about every work area that lets you know the things that each team is responsible for, and a suggested calendar of team meetings, how those decisions might be made as well. I thank you for your attention to this. I look forward to working with you next year. If there are things you want to know more about, do please feel free to contact me or Jim Barnes, and we look forward to working with you next year. The Lord be with you.